Okay, somebody had to talk about it. Might as well be me. Hey everybody, it's Beth, and welcome to Infinite Garden. I've been watching, and just like that, the Sex and the City reboot, and I'm wondering if you have been too. I watched Sex and the City when it was originally airing, and I saw one of the movies, not both of them. So I would say that I was, a fan. I was a fan enough to watch all of them. I wasn't a mega fan. I never took trips to New York to, follow the apartment tours or any of that kind of stuff, but I watched the show and I enjoyed it. I think a lot of the criticism that's been leveled at Sex and the City is totally justified. The reboot, and just like that, seems to be very aware of the criticism that has been leveled at Sex and the City and seems to try to handle it. It's handling issues of, gender and race and politics in general in ways that I think at least show that it has some awareness that it was deserving of some of the criticism it's received. So, I don't feel guilty piling on here. I want to talk about gray hair representation in And Just Like That. So let's get into it. If you're familiar with this show, you already know that Samantha is not in this series. We're down to just Carrie, Miranda, and Charlotte, and some of the other characters. We're also introduced to some new characters. But of the original gang, Miranda is the character who, during COVID, lets her hair go gray and reemerges as a character with gray hair. And I think it's great that they did have one of the characters choose to go gray. Of course, it was Miranda. I guess I wouldn't really expect it to be Carrie, and it makes sense that it wouldn't be Charlotte either, who's extremely uptight and all about keeping up appearances at any cost. And Miranda has always been sort of the more practical, a woman in the quad and now in the trio. She's in many ways the character that was sort of the least glamorous. She always had amazing clothes, but they were more practical and worldly, and she had a very serious white-collar professional job. She was a high-powered attorney. I think for a lot of women, the fantasy of Sex and the City was sort of born by both kind of the Carrie and the Samantha figures. When people would try to decide which character they're the most aligned with, you'd hear mostly, I feel like,
I'm a Carrie or I'm a Samantha.
I always sort of kind of felt deep down like I'm probably a Miranda. I have a really serious job and professional life, and while I really love great clothes and looking good, I wouldn't necessarily break any land speed records chasing after trends. So in short, I've always personally kind of, identified with Miranda more than any of the others, and so it sort of seemed like a fit that she came through with the gray hair. This is fine. I was kind of excited to see it. Before I get any further, please know this is going to be full of spoiler alerts, so watch this at your own risk. Miranda also emerges in this new series with an apparent drinking problem, and she's having a professional crisis. She's been a high-powered corporate attorney, but the events of the last couple of years have led her to pursue an advanced degree in a social justice field because she wants to use her legal power to, affect social justice. So that part's cool. The drinking problem appears to be concerning, but she's coming through this with a whole set of complex responses, which I think is pretty good. One thing I've always liked about the show that I think it does well is it does present women in this world as having complex lives. These characters have never been perfectly flat, which I appreciate. And the same is true for this show. The women who are now in their mid-50s, they are experiencing, a cornucopia of life's possibilities at this time in their lives. So I do appreciate that. So in episode 1, Miranda's gray hair is directly addressed right away. The 3 remaining characters go out for one of their kind of standard brunches, and Charlotte is directly questioning Miranda's choice to let her hair go gray, and she's frankly bullying her for this choice. Miranda responds by saying she doesn't really care about her hair and that she's interested in social justice. Charlotte responds by saying even Ruth Bader Ginsburg dyed her hair. This is highly provocative. I don't really think the Notorious RBG needed to get dragged into this particular conversation, but I do think this could have provided an interesting time for one of the characters, and I'm really looking at Carrie here, to have responded that the Vogue editor-in-chief for British Vogue, Sarah Harris, is a perfect example of a super high fashion woman with silver hair who's at the top of her game. I think that Carrie's character would know exactly who Sarah Harris is, and I think that she could have offered that up. I just think for the show, even in later episodes, there's a scene where Charlotte brings Carrie a whole stack of Vogues to help her cope with something that happens in the show. There's an awareness of Vogue. There's going to be an awareness of Sarah Harris. I think it would have been charitable for the show to acknowledge the fact that there is pretty fabulous silver hair representation at the highest levels in fashion. It gets worse. Later in the first episode, we see Miranda attending her first day of class at Columbia in pursuit of her new social justice degree. Miranda is extremely out of place, and she comically face plants into the race and hair discussion by commenting on her African American professor's braids. She realizes that she has spoken in a clumsy manner. She tries to backpedal by pointing to her own silver hair and saying, "I obviously don't care about hair," using her gray hair as evidence of such. Okay, so listen, I get it. For many of us, myself included, the crises in 2020 of the pandemic and the rising awareness of racial injustice did cause a lot of us to look again at what we were doing in our lives and reevaluate what was important. And for many of us, like I said, myself included, dyeing our hair no longer carried the same weight and importance it used to do. So I get that, and for maybe some women, the response to stop dyeing their hair really does come down to not caring about hair, but I don't think that's true for everybody. For me personally, what I really stopped caring about was conforming. All you have to do is look at my luxury hair care budget to get the picture pretty quickly that I absolutely still do care about my hair, but I just don't really care about conforming with what I'm supposed to be looking like according to society. It's a fine distinction, but I was kind of annoyed by the idea that letting your hair go gray means that you obviously don't care about hair at all. I myself cannot relate to that statement. And finally, in a moment of pettiness, can we talk about Miranda's actual hair? Now, I understand that Cynthia Nixon may not naturally have silver hair, and so in order for the character of Miranda to be the silver-haired sister among them, they had to go to a salon effect. I get it. That makes sense. Cynthia Nixon is not a redhead naturally, so in the entire series before, the character of Miranda's red hair was always salon-assisted. This is nothing new. So fine, we get it. It's Hollywood magic. Carrie's hair is extravagantly dyed in one of the most expensive and beautiful salon jobs I've seen on television recently. In that first episode, when they're having the brunch and Charlotte is bullying Miranda about her choice to go gray, Miranda accuses Charlotte of trying to pass because Charlotte is still covering her gray and wearing her traditional, single color chestnut brown hair. And Miranda, gives Carrie a pass by saying, "Carrie's hair is obviously dyed. Look at it. This is clearly a salon effect. She's not trying to pass." This is a very fine distinction, but what hung in there for me on this was that I can't believe what a rotten salon job they gave Cynthia Nixon's hair to appear as though she were a silver sister. I, like many of you, follow Jack Martin, the colorist, on Instagram. I'm aware of what's possible in a salon if you want to achieve stunning silver effects. Why couldn't they do this for Cynthia Nixon? Miranda's hair is busted. Look, this is terrible. This is a terrible, terrible dye job. Perhaps the entire hair budget was dedicated to Carrie's hair. I just personally feel like Miranda deserves better. Honestly, nobody looks like this. I see a lot of my silver sisters on YouTube or Instagram. I see a lot of examples. I bet a lot of you do too. No one who's letting their hair go silver naturally looks this bad. Her hair looks dry. It looks uneven. This is a terrible dye job. Later, at the end of the episode, when Carrie and Miranda are walking down the street without Charlotte, Miranda's processing kind of how she feels about the way Charlotte was bullying her, and she seeks reassurance from Carrie that her hair is okay. Carrie turns to her and says, "It's fabulous." And I love this. I love this support from her friend. I just wish they had gotten Miranda a better salon job, so at least those of us watching the show would know for sure that Carrie's words weren't just a pretty white lie, because there's nothing fabulous about the salon job they gave Cynthia Nixon. I've been sitting on this for a little while because I just watched the first episode a little while ago and I needed to catch up. I thought maybe they would clean it up later in following episodes, but the topic of her silver hair never comes up again. It also doesn't seem to improve. So this is what we get, Silver Sisters, in And Just Like That. The representation of those of us who've chosen to go silver is going to be Miranda with a really poorly simulated effect. And you know what? It's not good enough, but it's also not totally surprising. What would have made me happier? A few things. Number one, I've already said it. Get Jack Martin to do her hair. Make it truly fabulous. This is possible, and Cynthia Nixon and Miranda both deserve it. Number two, an acknowledgement that it's not just about not caring about your hair, but it is about not conforming, and it's also a health choice. Dyeing your hair regularly does have health consequences, and I feel like it's worth mentioning that. That would be meaningful, I think, in this show. And finally, I'd like to see an apology from Charlotte to Miranda for bullying her about choosing to wear her hair in its natural state. I think there's a lot of women who are watching this show who can relate to Miranda in this circumstance, and I think it would be good for Charlotte's character to pull it together and admit that she's being a... Anyway, those are my thoughts about And Just Like That. Are you guys watching it? Did you have any reactions to this? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this show. Do you love Sex and the City? Do you hate it? Do you love to criticize it? I'm still here for the fashions. I can't help it. You know I want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. Thanks so much.